Today on February 12th, this moment is not accidental, and this message is not drifting through time without purpose. There are days on God's calendar that look ordinary to the world but thunder loudly in the spirit realm, and February 12th is one of them. Something unseen has reached a critical point, and heaven has responded with urgency. Archangel Michael does not speak casually. He does not interrupt without cause. When his voice breaks through, it is because a line has been crossed, a sequence has been set in motion, and divine intervention has been authorized. This is not a message meant to scare you. It is a message meant to stop something. Right now, you are standing at the intersection of warning and outcome, and the reason you are hearing this is because heaven still allows a defense. There are moments when God allows you to continue unaware, and there are moments when He pulls back the veil because what is coming can still be interrupted. This is one of those moments. Somewhere someone prayed against you in secret. Not openly, not boldly, not where you could hear or confront it. It was whispered, calculated, intentional, and cloaked. You were never meant to know through natural means. But secrecy does not hide anything from heaven. Every word spoken with intention enters the spiritual record, and when those words are fueled by envy, resentment, or manipulation, they carry weight. What makes this urgent is not just that the prayer was spoken, but that it was allowed to begin producing an effect. Understand this clearly. Heaven does not permit everything, but heaven does permit certain things to test alignment, timing, and authority. That permission is never permanent. It is conditional. And today, that condition has reached its limit. That is why this message is being released as your last defense. Not your only defense, your last. Meaning there has already been patience, covering, and restraint exercised on your behalf. Meaning the window to remain unaware has closed. Meaning silence is no longer protection. Awareness now becomes the shield. Archangel Michael's role is not symbolic. He is assigned to warfare, defense, and enforcement of divine law. When he speaks urgently, it is because something has progressed far enough that delay would equal consent. Heaven is not threatening you. Heaven is alerting you. Ignore this, and the outcome will proceed without interruption. That phrase is not poetic. It is legal language in the spirit. Outcomes proceed when warnings are dismissed. Sequences continue when signals are ignored. But the moment a warning is received, the rules change. That is why you are here, listening, feeling that quiet pressure in your spirit that says this is not just another message. February 12th matters because timing matters. Spiritual movements do not happen randomly. There are cycles, permissions, and deadlines. What was spoken against you was not meant to explode instantly. It was meant to work subtly, through confusion, delays, miscommunication, fatigue, and erosion. You may have felt unusually drained without explanation. You may have noticed doors slowing down, clarity fading, or relationships shifting without reason. Those were not coincidences, they were early indicators. But early indicators are merciful. They are signs given before damage becomes destiny. This message arrives now because the next phase was approaching, and the next phase does not announce itself. That is why Archangel Michael speaks before it arrives, not after. This is heaven stepping in between cause and effect. This is the pause before consequence. This is divine intelligence interrupting a hidden strategy. The reason this feels heavy is because it carries authority. The reason it feels personal is because it is targeted. And the reason it feels urgent is because time was involved. You were not chosen for this message because you are weak. You were chosen because you are positioned. Secret opposition is attracted to visible potential. The higher the calling, the quieter the attack. Open enemies are easy to discern. Hidden ones require discernment from heaven. That is why you were not meant to fight blindly. That is why heaven speaks now. This message is not asking you to panic. It is asking you to pay attention. Panic scatters authority. Awareness gathers it. There is a reason the warning is clear. Ignore it, and the outcome will proceed without interruption. Not because God abandons you, but because God honors free will and spiritual law. Warnings create responsibility. Once truth is revealed, response matters. Heaven will not force you to act, but heaven will not override what you choose to dismiss. That is why this message feels like a line in the sand. You are not being accused. You are being equipped. You are not being condemned. You are being defended. Right now, something is being held back while this message reaches you. That alone should tell you how serious this is. Time has slowed in your favor. The spiritual atmosphere has shifted to allow understanding before impact. That is mercy. That is protection. And that is why this opening matters so deeply. Everything that follows builds on this truth. You are not too late, but you are no longer early. You are exactly on time to respond. Listen carefully. This is not entertainment. This is instruction wrapped in warning. The fact that you are here means heaven still recognizes you as reachable, teachable, and worth defending. But defense requires participation. The door is still open, but it will not remain open indefinitely. Today, February 12th, is marked because today, the message arrived. And now that it has, nothing stays neutral anymore. What makes this moment unsettling is not just that someone prayed against you, but that you never heard it happen. There was no argument, no confrontation, no obvious enemy standing in front of you. It was hidden on purpose. This is how the most effective spiritual opposition operates, quietly, privately, and with intention masked as innocence. The prayer was not loud because it did not need to be. It was focused. It was deliberate. And it was released when you were least guarded, when you were trusting, moving forward, or simply trying to live your life without suspicion. That is why it carried weight. Not because it was stronger than you, but because it was secret. You need to understand something clearly. Not all prayers come from a pure place. Prayer is a powerful instrument, and like any instrument, it can be used with the wrong motive. When words are spoken with jealousy, control, resentment, or bitterness, they do not dissolve just because they are whispered to heaven. They enter the spiritual realm carrying intent. Heaven does not confuse intent. God hears everything, but not everything he hears is endorsed. Still, certain things are allowed to test, reveal, and expose. What you are facing now is not punishment. It is exposure of what was hidden. The reason you did not feel it immediately is because these kinds of attacks are designed to blend into normal life. They do not arrive as chaos. They arrive as subtle shifts. A delay that makes you doubt yourself. A misunderstanding that creates distance. A weariness that feels out of character. A fog that makes simple decisions feel heavy. You may have blamed stress, timing, or yourself. That is exactly how secrecy works. It redirects suspicion inward. But heaven saw the source clearly. Heaven traced the words back to their origin. And now heaven is alerting you because silence has done its job long enough. There are signs you were targeted, even if you did not recognize them at first. A sudden resistance where there used to be flow. People misunderstanding your intentions without explanation. Opportunity stalling at the final moment. A sense that something is pushing against you, not violently, but persistently. These are not signs of failure, they are signs of interference. The enemy rarely attacks what is stagnant. Resistance is proof of movement. Opposition is evidence of direction. And secret opposition usually means the threat you pose is greater than you realize. This is where many people make a mistake. They assume that because they did nothing wrong, nothing is happening. But innocence does not cancel warfare. Integrity does not make you invisible. In fact, it often makes you a target. That is why this message is not about fear, it is about clarity. You are being informed so that you stop internalizing what was externally initiated. You were never meant to carry confusion as identity. You were never meant to absorb pressure as destiny. Once you know there was a hidden prayer, you stop blaming yourself for its effects. Now listen carefully, because this is where your participation matters. Messages like this do not arrive to passive listeners. They arrive to those who are meant to respond, align, and act. That is why, if you feel this resonating deeply, this is the moment to anchor yourself spiritually. Engage with this message intentionally. Take a simple action that declares alignment instead of a difference. Like this message as a sign that you receive the warning. Subscribe to this channel so you remain connected to what heaven continues to reveal. And leave a comment, even if it is just one word, to mark that you did not scroll past what was meant to shield you. These actions are not about algorithms alone. They are about agreement. Agreement shifts atmosphere. Do not underestimate the power of agreement. Many outcomes proceed simply because no one interrupted them. Awareness interrupts. Engagement interrupts. Alignment interrupts. When you choose to participate instead of observe, you step out of the line of passive consequence and into active defense. That is why this part matters so much. You are no longer just hearing about the hidden prayer. You are responding to heaven's exposure of it. This is also why timing is emphasized again. The prayer spoken against you was not recent, but its effect was approaching visibility. Heaven often waits until the last responsible moment to reveal something, because revelation without readiness can overwhelm. You are ready now. Ready to see without fear. Ready to stand without confusion. Ready to stop carrying what does not belong to you. That readiness is why this message found you instead of passing you by. Understand this. Secrecy loses power the moment it is revealed. What operates in darkness weakens in light. The person who prayed against you relied on your unawareness. They relied on time doing the work for them. But time has now been interrupted. The moment you acknowledge this, the strategy begins to unravel. That does not mean everything resolved instantly, but it does mean momentum shifts. And momentum is everything in the spirit. As this part closes, let this truth settle into you. You were not caught off guard. You were informed just in time. Heaven did not expose this to frighten you, but to fortify you. What was whispered in secret has now been addressed in light. And from this point forward, you are no longer reacting. You are responding with authority. Heaven has systems in place long before danger becomes disaster. What you are witnessing right now is not a reaction. It is an alarm. There is a moment in spiritual law when something crosses from intention into motion, and that is when heaven responds differently. This is that moment. The reason this message feels weighty is because an invisible threshold was reached. What was whispered in secret did not remain idle. It began to move. And the moment it began to move, heaven activated its alert system. Many people assume heaven only intervenes after damage is done, but that is not true. Heaven intervenes at turning points. There are stages to every spiritual sequence: intent, permission, motion, and outcome. The alarm sounds between motion and outcome. That is the narrow space where reversal is still possible. You are standing in that space right now. That alone tells you how precise this timing is. This is not coincidence. This is intervention with purpose. Archangel Michael's involvement reveals the seriousness of what was unfolding. He is not sent for minor disturbances. He is assigned where boundaries are being tested and authority must be enforced. His role is to stand between what is authorized by God and what is being attempted without right. When he speaks, it means something has tried to advance beyond its allowance. The alarm was triggered because the hidden prayer crossed into a phase where it would begin shaping outcomes instead of merely influencing atmosphere. This is where mercy and justice meet. Mercy reveals. Justice enforces. Heaven did not expose this because it failed to protect you earlier. Heaven exposed it because protection had reached its final silent stage. Silence was no longer enough. Covering without awareness was no longer sufficient. The next step required your participation. That is why this message came before manifestation, not after. Once something manifests fully, it must be endured. Before manifestation, it can be interrupted. There is a difference between being attacked and being overtaken. You were attacked, but you were not overtaken. That is critical. Many people never receive a warning. They only experience fallout. You received a warning because you are still within reach of redirection. Heaven does not waste alarms. If this were already settled, you would not be hearing this. The very fact that you are listening means the alarm worked. You may be wondering why this was allowed to get this far. The answer is not because you were unprotected, but because spiritual authority grows through discernment. Some lessons are not learned through explanation but through revelation. Awareness sharpens authority. Once you see how subtle opposition works, you stop underestimating your position. Heaven trusts you with this knowledge now because you are capable of holding it without fear. Fear would weaken you. Understanding strengthens you. This alarm is also about timing on your side. The opposition relied on momentum. Momentum only works when no one intervenes. Heaven intervened by alerting you. Once alerted, momentum begins to collapse. That is why this part is so important. This is the shift from silent pressure to conscious resistance. You are no longer absorbing. You are discerning. You are no longer confused. You are informed. That alone changes the outcome trajectory. And now hear this carefully. What happens when a divine warning is ignored is not punishment. It is permission for sequence completion. Spiritual systems respect joys. Heaven will not force awareness to become action. That is why the message is firm. This is your last defense, not because God is harsh, but because all previous defenses were invisible. Invisible defenses require no response. Visible warnings do. This is the moment responsibility transfers to you. But do not mistake responsibility for burden. This is empowerment. You are being trusted with truth at the exact moment it matters. Heaven does not sound alarms for those it plans to abandon. It sounds alarms for those it intends to preserve. That is the tone you need to hear in this message. Urgency does not mean danger has won. Urgency means danger had been exposed. As you receive this, something is already shifting. Awareness itself interrupts spiritual processes. Light disrupts patterns that depend on darkness. The hidden prayer has now been named, even if not publicly. But naming weakens it. What was operating quietly is now under scrutiny. And scrutiny changes everything. Before this part closes, there is something you must do, not later, not mentally, but intentionally. This is a moment of alignment. Type "I stand under divine defense" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 412 is now activated. This is not just symbolic. It is a marker. It declares that you did not hear this warning passively. It signals agreement with heaven's intervention. And as you do this, understand something powerful. The alarm was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of reversal. This moment you're standing in is bigger than you. When God releases a warning like this, it's not only to protect one life, it's to rescue many who are still walking unaware. I feel led to tell you this directly. When you sow into this message, you help light reach souls who are still surrounded by silence. Scripture says God gives seed to the sower, and right now He is placing seed in your hand for a reason. What you release becomes a shield for someone else. This is not a donation. This is obedience in motion. Support this mission through Super Thanks, channel membership, or PayPal. The links are waiting in the description, and the PayPal QR code is flashing on your screen. Step into this prophetic moment and release what heaven is prompting you to release. Do it now. To understand why this attack was allowed to begin, you must let go of the idea that permission means approval. Heaven does not approve of harm, but it does allow exposure. There is a difference. What was released against you was not given unlimited access. It was given limited room. And that room existed for one reason: to reveal what could not be seen any other way. Some things only surface when pressure is applied. Some intentions only become visible when time tests them. What you are facing now is not evidence that you were unguarded. It is evidence that something hidden needed to be brought into the open. Spiritual permission often exists to uncover truth. If God immediately blocked every hidden scheme, you would never know who stood against you, what tactics were being used, or how subtle opposition truly operates. Discernment would remain underdeveloped. Authority would remain theoretical. So heaven allows the first move, not to empower the enemy, but to expose them. Exposure weakens far more effectively than resistance alone. Once something is seen clearly, it can no longer pretend to be harmless. Here is also another reason this was allowed to begin. Growth attracts friction. Elevation attracts attention. Movement attracts resistance. You were not attacked because you are falling behind. You were targeted because you are moving forward. Stillness rarely draws opposition. Erection does. The prayer spoken against you did not come from nowhere. It came as a response to who you are becoming. People do not pray against what does not threaten their position, their comfort, or their control. The attack was not random. It was reactive. Heaven also allows certain things to test spiritual maturity. Not to see if you will fail, but to see how you will respond once truth is revealed. There is a stage where protection shifts from external to internal. Earlier in life, God blocks things before you even sense them. Later, He teaches you how to recognize and stand. This message marks that transition. You are being treated as someone capable of understanding warfare without being consumed by fear. That alone speaks volumes about your spiritual position. Another uncomfortable truth is this: not every door that opens is opened by God, but God still uses open doors to teach discernment. The hidden prayer was a door attempt. It was not meant to stay open forever. It was meant to reveal how doors work. Once you see the mechanism, you stop being vulnerable to it. Heaven allowed the attempt so you would recognize the pattern. That recognition is protection that lasts far beyond this moment. You must also understand that opposition does not mean defeat is near. Often it means exposure is near. The person who prayed against you relied on anonymity. They relied on the assumption that nothing would surface. But secrecy has a shelf life. The longer it operates, the closer it gets to revelation. What you are witnessing now is that shelf life expiring. Heaven did not rush this exposure because timing matters. Exposed too early, and you dismiss it. Exposed too late, and damage is done. This exposure arrived at the exact point where understanding would produce authority. This part of the message also corrects a dangerous misconception that God's silence means absence. Silence often means restraint. Heaven was restraining the full effect while preparing the warning. What felt like delay was actually containment. What felt like heaviness was pressure being held back. You were not collapsing. You were being preserved. That is why, despite everything, you are still standing. That is why the situation did not spiral beyond control. That is why the message arrived before outcome. There is wisdom in allowing the first ripple but stopping the wave. Heaven allowed the ripple so you would recognize the source. Now the wave is being addressed. The sequence protects you from future attempts. Once you see how this works, you will notice patterns sooner, respond faster, and carry greater authority. This was not meant to weaken you. It was meant to sharpen you. This is also why you were not told immediately who prayed against you. Names are less important than understanding. Fixating on the person distracts from the principle. Heaven is teaching you how opposition moves, not just who initiated it. Once you understand the movement, the identity loses power. The goal is not confrontation, it is insulation. The goal is not revenge, it is prevention. Let this settle deeply. God did not allow this because he stepped away. He allowed it because he stepped closer. He allowed it so you could see, learn, and rise with clarity. The warning you received is proof that heaven never lost sight of you, not for a moment. What began was never meant to finish. It was allowed to start so it could be stopped with precision. As this part closes, release the thought that this should never have happened. Replace it with this truth. It happened so it could be revealed, corrected, and neutralized. You are not behind. You are not exposed. You are being instructed at a higher level now. And what comes next builds directly on this understanding, because now that you know why it was allowed, you are ready to understand how it is stopped. What you are standing in right now is not just a moment of awareness. It is a legal window in the spirit realm. Spiritual outcomes do not happen randomly. They move through processes, permissions, and timing. Every action spoken or released with intent enters a system governed by spiritual law. This is why the phrase "the outcome will proceed without interruption" carries such weight. Outcomes are not emotional events. They are legal conclusions. And legal conclusions only change when a higher authority intervenes within the allowed time frame. That time frame is what you are in now. A legal window is a limited period where something can still be challenged, redirected, or nullified. Once that window closes, the process continues to completion, not because God is cruel, but because spiritual law respects order. Heaven is orderly. It does not operate on chaos or impulse. That is why warnings arrive before outcomes, not after. Once an outcome is finalized, heaven does not undo it casually. It redeems it. But redemption is harder than prevention. That is why this moment matters so deeply. When the hidden prayer was spoken, it entered a timeline. That timeline did not rush forward immediately. It waited. It aligned with circumstances, emotions, and opportunities. It looked for openings, moments of discouragement, distraction, or fatigue. That is how spiritual strategies work. They are patient. But patience does not mean permanence. Every strategy has an expiration if challenged in time. This message is the challenge. The legal window you are in exists because heaven recognized that you had not yet consented through awareness. Consent is not just agreement, it is acceptance through inaction. When something operates without your knowledge, it cannot claim your consent. But once you are warned, the responsibility shifts. If you ignore it, silence becomes permission. If you acknowledge it, awareness becomes authority. That is why this message draws such a clear line. Neutrality is no longer neutral once truth is revealed. This is also why silence could be mistaken for safety. Many people assume that because nothing dramatic has happened, nothing is happening. But legal processes rarely announce themselves loudly. They move quietly until they conclude. The most dangerous outcomes are the ones that feel slow and subtle. That is why heaven interrupted before things escalated. The goal was not to wait until damage forced belief. The goal was to inform you while choice still mattered. Within this legal window, something powerful is true. Recognition alone alters jurisdiction. The moment you recognize that something was spoken against you, the spiritual territory shifts. What was operating without resistance now encounters awareness. Awareness introduces scrutiny. Scrutiny demands justification. And unjustified actions cannot stand indefinitely under divine law. That is why exposure is so threatening to hidden opposition. It forces everything into the open, where it must answer to higher authority. This window is also about timing on your side. You were not shown this too early, when you might dismiss it, and not too late, when you would feel trapped. You were shown it exactly when your response could still change direction. The precision is intentional. Heaven does not guess. It calculates perfectly. The message arrived when you were capable of responding with discernment instead of fear. Understand this carefully. The phrase "proceed without interruption" does not mean destruction is guaranteed. It means momentum is respected. Momentum only continues when nothing interrupts. Heaven has now provided the interruption. Whether it is activated depends on your response. That is why this is a legal window, not a verdict. The verdict has not been issued yet. You are still in the hearing stage. There is also a reason this feels sobering instead of dramatic. Legal moments are quiet. They are not filled with noise. They are filled with gravity. Decisions made here echo later. What you choose to do with this awareness will ripple forward. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. It simply allows the existing trajectory to continue. Responding to it introduces a new trajectory entirely. This is where many people misunderstand spiritual warfare. They think it is about force, intensity, or emotion. In reality, it is about timing, authority, and response. The most effective battles are won before they are visible. That is what is happening now. You are not being asked to fight blindly. You are being asked to acknowledge truth and align with heaven's intervention. As this part comes to a close, let this settle into your spirit. You are not late. You are not trapped. You are not powerless. You are standing in a narrow but powerful window where understanding still changes everything. Heaven has paused the process long enough for you to see it clearly. What happens next depends on how you move from this awareness into alignment. And that is exactly what the next part will reveal. Because now that you understand the legal window, you are ready to understand the warning behind its urgency. The tone of this message matters just as much as its content. Archangel Michael's warning is not soft, and it is not vague. It carries urgency because urgency reveals proximity. When something is distant, heaven whispers. When something is near, heaven speaks firmly. This is not panic in the voice you are hearing. It is precision. Urgency does not mean chaos is inevitable. It means timing is critical. And timing is everything in the spirit realm. There is a reason this warning does not come wrapped in comfort first. Comfort soothes, but urgency activates. Heaven knows when reassurance will relax you too much. In moments like this, relaxation can be dangerous. Not because you are at risk of harm, but because passivity can be mistaken for peace. Archangel Michael's tone cuts through that confusion. It separates calm from complacency. It reminds you that peace is not the absence of awareness, but the presence of alignment. Michael's authority is rooted in enforcement. He does not negotiate with opposition. He establishes boundaries. When he speaks urgently, it is because a boundary is being tested in real time. Something attempted to move beyond its allowance. Something pressed closer than it should have. The warning is not emotional. It is procedural. It is the sound of heaven saying, "This goes no further unless permitted." And right now, permission is being questioned. Urgency also reveals that this message is not meant to sit with you indefinitely. It is meant to be acted upon internally. Heaven is not asking you to analyze endlessly or speculate. It is asking you to recognize and respond. Delay dulls discernment. Prolonged hesitation weakens authority. That is why the tone does not allow you to drift. It anchors you in the present moment, where choice still holds power. This is also why the warning feels direct rather than gentle. Gentleness is for healing. Directness is for prevention. There is a difference. Heaven heals wounds softly, but it prevents harm firmly. Archangel Michael's voice carries that firmness. It does not accuse you. It addresses the situation. It does not shame you. It positions you. And it does not exaggerate. It clarifies. The urgency is also a sign of respect. Heaven does not rush those it does not trust. Urgency implies confidence in your ability to respond appropriately. You are being spoken to as someone capable of discernment, not as someone fragile. That alone should shift how you hear this. You are not being overwhelmed. You are being entrusted with timely truth. Another reason the tone is urgent is because spiritual momentum does not slow on its own. Momentum must be interrupted. The longer something moves unchecked, the more force it gathers. Heaven does not wait until momentum peaks before intervening. It intervenes at the point where interruption is still effective. The point hath been reached. The warning is sharp because the margin is narrow, not non-existent, but narrow. There is also clarity and urgency. It strips away unnecessary layers. It leaves no room for misinterpretation. Ignore this, and the outcome will proceed without interruption. Is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to inform you of cause and effect. Spiritual law operates regardless of emotion. Ignoring truth does not nullify it. Acknowledging truth empowers you to respond to it. The urgency is simply making that reality unmistakable. Do not confuse urgency with doom. Doom implies inevitability. Urgency implies opportunity. If there were no opportunity, there would be no warning. Silence would have followed instead. Heaven speaks urgently because heaven still sees room for change. That is the hope embedded within the firmness. It is not spoken explicitly yet, but it is there. The tone also reveals that this is not a long-term standoff. This is a moment, a decision point, a line between what continues and what is stopped. Heaven does not stretch moments like this unnecessarily. It concentrates them. That concentration is what you are feeling. It draws your attention fully into the now. As this part closes, receive this truth without fear. Urgency is not pressure. It is protection expressed clearly. Archangel Michael's warning is sharp because it is precise. It is firm because it is effective. And it is timely because delay would benefit the wrong side. You are not being rushed into confusion. You are being guided into clarity. What comes next builds on this urgency, not to intensify fear, but to show you how close you are to resolution now that the warning hath been fully heard. There are moments in life when you can sense that something is about to change, even if you cannot explain why. That feeling is not imagination. It is awareness forming. What you are standing in now is what can be called the final gate. A gate is not an ending, and it is not a beginning, it is a threshold. It is the point where one direction must be chosen over another. You do not stand at a gate forever. You either pass through it consciously, where circumstances carry you through it unconsciously. The signs you have been experiencing are indicators that you have reached this point. One of the clearest signs is a strange sense of heaviness mixed with clarity. Not confusion, but pressure. You may feel like something hath been weighing on you, yet at the same time, certain truths are becoming sharper. This combination is not accidental. Heaviness without clarity leads to discouragement. Clarity without pressure leads to complacency. Together, they signal decision. Heaven often allows pressure to rise just enough to wake discernment, not to crush you, but to focus you. Another sign is repetition. The same themes, warnings, or realizations appearing again and again in different forms. Conversations that echo the same message. Thoughts that return no matter how much you try to dismiss them. Moments where you pause and think, why does this feel important? Repetition is how heaven emphasizes without shouting. When something repeats, it is because it wants to be acknowledged before you move forward. You may also notice a sense of separation beginning to form. Certain connections feel strained. Certain environments feel uncomfortable. Things that once felt neutral now feel misaligned. This is not because something is wrong with you. It is because gates require alignment. You cannot pass through a gate carrying what does not belong on the other side. The discomfort is not rejection. It is preparation. Heaven adjusts your surroundings as your awareness changes. Another indicator is emotional fluctuation that feels unfamiliar. Not instability, but sensitivity. You may find yourself more reflective, more alert, more aware of undercurrents. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is perception sharpening. When you approach a filed gate, your spirit becomes more attentive because something meaningful is at stake. You are sensing consequence before it manifests. That is discernment activating. Here is also the sign of almost resolved, almost clear, almost settled. Things seem close, yet not quite complete. That almost can be frustrating, but it is significant. It tells you that you are not far off course. You are at a junction. One small shift determines which side of the gate you end up on. Heaven often uses the feeling of almost to keep you engaged rather than discouraged. It reminds you that progress has been made, but something still needs recognition. Another sign is a quiet urgency that does not feel rushed by the world. It does not come from deadlines or demands. It comes from within. A sense that now matters. That delay feels heavier than action. This urgency does not shout, it nudges. It is the inner confirmation that timing is involved. When urgency rises without external pressure, it usually means a window is narrowing. You may also notice that distractions are losing their appeal. Things that once helped you avoid deeper reflection no longer satisfy you. This is important. Dates require attention. Distraction is the enemy of discernment. When heaven prepares you to choose, it often dulls the distraction so you can hear more clearly. A narrowing of focus is intentional. All of these signs point to the same reality. You are standing at a final gate not because something bad is guaranteed, but because something significant is possible. Gates appear when outcomes are near, not when nothing is happening. The phrase last defense does not mean hopelessness. It means final opportunity to intervene consciously. It is the difference between being carried by momentum and stepping with intention. The reason this gate feels final is because it leads in two very different directions. One path allows things to proceed as they have been, slowly shaping outcomes without your input. The other path involves awareness, alignment, and interruption. Neither path is chaotic. Both are orderly. But only one involves your authority being exercised intentionally. Heaven does not force you through the gate. It reveals it. Revelation is respect. You are being respected enough to choose with understanding rather than ignorance. That is why this message did not arrive after everything was settled. You arrived at the gate. As this part comes to a close, take this truth with you. Standing at a final gate does not mean you are late or endangered. It means you are trusted with choice. The signs you have noticed are not warnings of failure. They are confirmations of timing. You are not here by accident. You are here because something still responds to awareness. And in the next part, you will understand exactly what shifts the moment you receive this message, not as information, but as recognition that the gate is real and you are ready to pass through it with clarity. The moment you truly receive this message, something shifts immediately, even if nothing around you changes yet. Reception is not passive hearing. It is recognition. Recognition activates awareness, and awareness activates authority. This is why heaven does not measure response by emotion, but by acknowledgement. The instant you recognize that this message applies to you, the spiritual environment adjusts. What was operating quietly is no longer unchallenged. What was moving unnoticed is now observed. And observation alone alters behavior in the unseen realm. Reception creates disruption. Hidden strategies rely on ignorance. They depend on you moving forward without questioning unexplained resistance. But the moment you receive this message, you step out of that ignorance. You stop absorbing pressure blindly and start discerning it intentionally. That shift weakens opposition more than confrontation ever could. Nothing hidden remains comfortable once it has been seen. This is why awareness is described as a weapon. Not because it attacks, but because it exposes. Exposure removes leverage. Once you know something was spoken against you, you no longer internalize its effects as personal failure. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start recognizing something external tried to interfere. That distinction restores clarity, and clarity restores strength. Heaven responds instantly to reception. The moment you acknowledge this warning internally, heaven registers it as consent to intervene. That does not mean everything resolves in 1 second, but it does mean the direction changes. The sequence you were warned about does not continue unchecked. A pause is enforced. A review begins. What was progressing automatically now requires authorization again, and that authorization is no longer assumed. This is where many people misunderstand spiritual shifts. They expect dramatic external signs, but the most powerful changes happen quietly at first. Momentum sows. Pressure eases. Confusion lifts subtly. You may not feel relief immediately, but you will notice space. Space to think clearly. Space to respond instead of react. Space to breathe without unexplained heaviness. That space is evidence that reception has already done its work. Another thing happens the moment you receive this message. Your discernment sharpens. You begin noticing patterns you previously overlooked. Comments, behaviors, thoughts, or situations that suddenly make sense in light of what you now know. This is not paranoia. It is clarity. Discernment does not make you suspicious. It makes you accurate. Accuracy keeps you grounded. Reception also shifts how heaven communicates with you going forward. Once you respond to warning with humility instead of dismissal, you are entrusted with greater clarity. Heaven speaks more clearly to those who listen attentively. That does not mean more messages. It means clearer ones. You will notice that confusion loses its grip faster than before. Decisions feel more anchored. That is not coincidence. It is alignment. There is also a protective effect that activates the moment you receive this. Not because you earned it, but because you align with it. Protection that was previously operating silently now operates cooperatively. You are no longer unaware of what is being guarded. That awareness makes protection more effective. You begin moving in ways that support what heaven is already doing for you. This is why the message emphasizes reception rather than reaction. You are not required to fight, argue, or confront. You are required to recognize and align. Recognition is the pivot point. Once recognition happens, the outcome is no longer inevitable. It becomes conditional again. Now, before this part closes, this moment needs to be marked intentionally. Not out of superstition, but out of agreement. Type "I receive divine interruption" in the comments if this message has reached you clearly. Blessing code 619 is now activated. This is a declaration of reception. It marks that you did not hear this warning and move on and change. It signals agreement with heaven's intervention. And as you do this, understand that something is already shifting behind the scenes in ways you may not fully see yet. You'll be glad you stayed for what's about to be revealed. What you just received was not meant to stop with you. When God releases a warning like this, it is because many are still walking without awareness, and your obedience helps reach them. I hear this clearly. When you give, you are sowing light into places where darkness has gone unchallenged for too long. The word says God pours oil where vessels are willing, and your support becomes that vessel. This is not about helping a channel. It's about helping heaven interrupt outcomes in other lives. Act now through Super Thanks, channel membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description and the PayPal QR code is on your screen. Release your seed in this moment and let God multiply it beyond what you can see. Now everything comes down to a choice. Not a dramatic one, not a complicated one, but a decisive one. Spiritual outcomes shift not when information is heard, but when direction is chosen. Up to this point, you have been warned, informed, and aligned. Now the question is simple but weighty. Will you move forward consciously, or will you drift forward unconsciously? This is where outcomes truly begin to separate. Neutrality is no longer an option, not because heaven is impatient, but because awareness has already been given. Once truth is revealed, remaining passive is still a decision. Silence becomes a response. Delay becomes agreement with momentum. This is why the message has been so clear. Heaven is not pressuring you emotionally. It is positioning you legally. What you choose now determines which sequence continues. The choice is not between fear and faith. It is between intention and assumption. Assumption says, things will work out on their own. Intention says, I will move with awareness and alignment. Assumption allows unseen processes to continue uninterrupted. Intention introduces interruption. Heaven responds to intention because intention signals authority. When you choose deliberately, you step into cooperation with divine order. This is also where obedience becomes simple, not heavy. You are not being asked to perform rituals or confront people. You are being asked to acknowledge, align, and act in small but meaningful ways. One of the most overlooked spiritual principles is this: Small acts done with awareness carry disproportionate weight. A simple decision made at the right time can halt an entire sequence. That is why this part includes action. Not because action earns protection, but because action confirms alignment. If this message resonates with you, do not keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who may be walking unaware. You may be the interruption heaven uses in their life. Engage with this message publicly, like it, comment on it, and make sure you are subscribed. These actions are not random. They declare that you are choosing awareness over indifference, alignment over avoidance. They also help this warning reach those who are standing at their own unseen gates. The danger is not that something bad will happen instantly if you hesitate. The danger is that momentum resumes quietly. Momentum does not announce itself. It simply continues. That is why delay feels so subtle yet costly. Many outcomes happen not because people chose them, but because they did not choose otherwise. This is the moment to choose otherwise. Choosing alignment does something profound. It reassigns authority. What was operating without your input now requires your consent, and you are no longer giving it. That refusal alone disrupts progression. Heaven honors refusal just as much as it honors agreement. When you refuse to remain unaware, you refuse to remain passive. That refusal is powerful. This is also where confidence returns. Not arrogance, but grounded certainty. You stop questioning every obstacle. You stop internalizing every delay. You move forward with discernment instead of doubt. That confidence does not come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing enough to respond wisely. There is also a ripple effect to this choice. Once you choose awareness here, you become more alert in other areas of life. You notice patterns sooner. You sense misalignment faster. You trust discernment more readily. That does not make life heavier. It makes it clearer. Clarity reduces fear. Clarity restores peace. As this part reaches its end, there is one more thing you need to hear. The choice you make now is not about fighting what was spoken against you. It is about walking in a way that no longer supports it. You do not need to dismantle everything consciously. Alignment dismantles things naturally. When you walk in light, darkness loses relevance. Hold this closely. The warning was given because choice still matters. And choice still matters because outcome is not fixed. What felt inevitable is now conditional. What felt heavy is now manageable. What felt hidden is now exposed. Pause for a moment and let this settle. This is not the climax yet. What comes next explains what happens after the choice is made, what shifts, what quiets, and what begins to reverse. And that next part will change how you see the silence that follows awareness. Once the choice is made, something subtle but decisive begins to happen. The opposite shifts first and assertives as a. This is how reversal starts, not with noise, but with quiet enforcement. What was hidden can no longer remain hidden, because light has been introduced. Exposure does not always mean public revelation. Sometimes exposure happens internally, in the spiritual realm, where motives are weighed and permissions are reviewed. That is where this shift begins. The hidden prayer that was spoken against you does not vanish instantly, but it loses authority. Authority is what gives words the power to shape outcomes. Once that authority is questioned, enforcement pauses. Heaven does not rush to dismantle, it reassesses. And reassessment changes everything. What was moving forward on assumption now faces scrutiny. What was proceeding quietly now stands under review. This is where divine interception takes place. Interception is not confrontation. It is redirection. Instead of allowing a sequence to complete as planned, heaven inserts a pause, a detour, or a delay that benefits you. This is why some things may suddenly feel slower, but lighter. Slowness with peace is protection. Speed with pressure is danger. Heaven often slows what needs to be preserved and speeds what needs to be removed. Exposure also affects the one who initiated the hidden prayer, not through punishment but through consequence. When intentions are brought into light, they no longer operate freely. The person may feel restlessness, confusion, or loss of clarity without understanding why. That is not revenge, that is imbalance correcting itself. What was fueled by secrecy loses stability once secrecy is removed. Darkness cannot organize well in the light. Another important shift happens here. Your role changes from target to witness. You are no longer being acted upon unknowingly. You are observing with discernment. That alone alters how future attempts interact with you. Once a pattern is recognized, it cannot surprise you again. Surprise is one of the greatest tools of opposition. Familiarity neutralizes it. You may begin noticing small reversals. Not dramatic wins, but quiet corrections. Conversations that soften. Situations that resolve without escalation. Opportunities that seemed blocked suddenly reopen, not forcefully, but naturally. These are signs of interception. Heaven rarely announces reversal. It implements it quietly so peace is restored without chaos. It is important to understand that reversal does not always look like restoration of everything at once. Sometimes it looks like prevention of further erosion. Stopping loss is as powerful as gaining ground. What did not fall apart is just as significant as what improves. Protection often goes unnoticed because it leaves no damage to point to. This is also where Archangel Michael's role becomes clear again. Enforcement does not require visibility. Boundaries are established whether or not you feel them. Once enforced, opposition adjusts its distance. Pressure recedes. The atmosphere lightens. You may notice you are no longer carrying the same internal weight you couldn't explain before. That is not emotional fluctuation. It is spiritual correction. Another aspect of reversal is exposure within yourself. Not exposure of weakness, but exposure of strength. You realize you handled pressure without collapsing. You recognized warning without panic. You chose alignment without being forced. That realization restores confidence. You are no longer questioning whether you can handle spiritual weight. You already did. Divine intersection also reorders timing. What was delayed to frustrate you may now be delayed to protect you. Delays shift purpose depending on who controls them. Under opposition, delay drains. Under heaven, delay preserves. You may sense that certain things are being held back gently, not blocked harshly. That is intentional. Heaven is repositioning pieces so future movement is cleaner. As this part unfolds, silence may increase. Not the heavy silence of uncertainty, but the calm silence of resolution underway. This is often misunderstood. People expect constant confirmation, but heaven grows quieter once enforcement is complete. Silence after warning is not abandonment. It is completion in progress. The noise was only needed to get your attention. Now the work continues without disturbance. This is the turning point where destiny is protected, not announced. The shift from target to testimony does not happen overnight, but it begins here. One day, you will look back and realize how close something came without ever fully touching you. That realization will not come with fear, but with gratitude. As this part closes, remember this. Exposure weakens what secrecy empowered. Interception redirects what momentum threatened. And reversal restores what alignment supports. You are no longer standing in danger. You are standing in correction. The story did not end where it could have, and changed direction quietly, precisely, and deliberately. And in the next part, you will understand why the silence that follows this shift is not emptiness, but assurance. After a warning is received and a shift begins, there is often a silence that follows. This silence can feel unfamiliar, even unsettling, if you do not understand its purpose. But this silence is not absence. It is not abandonment. It is not uncertainty. It is the sound of something being settled beyond your sight. Heaven does not remain loud once authority has been established. Noise is used to interrupt. Silence is used to stabilize. Many people mistake silence for a lack of movement. In truth, silence often means the most decisive work is happening. Think of it this way: storms are loud, but construction is quiet. Once the threat has been addressed, heaven does not need to keep repeating the warning. Repetition would create anxiety. Silence creates peace. The warning was meant to awaken you. The silence is meant to let you rest in alignment. This is where trust replaces urgency. Earlier, urgency was necessary to get your attention. And now, trust is necessary to let the process complete. If heaven continued to speak with the same intensity, it would keep you in a state of alert instead of assurance. Assurance is the goal. Assurance allows you to move forward without constantly looking over your shoulder. That forward movement is part of the protection. The silence also signals that enforcement has been delegated. Once boundaries are established, they do not need to be announced repeatedly. They simply exist. Opposition does not need reminders. It responds to authority automatically. What was pressing before now keeps its distance. You may notice fewer intrusive thoughts, fewer emotional fluctuations, fewer unexplained heavinesses. That is not coincidence. That is space being restored. Another reason for the silence is to prevent overfixation. If heaven kept explaining every detail, you would be tempted to monitor the situation instead of living freely. Monitoring keeps you mentally engaged with what no longer has permission. Silence breaks that engagement. It redirects your focus back to your life, your calling, your peace. The goal was never to make you hyper-aware of opposition. The goal was to make you aware enough to interrupt it, and then move on. This is also the phase where faith becomes quiet confidence. Not loud declarations, not constant reassurance, but steady grounding. You begin to sense that things are handled even without proof. That sense is not imagination. It is alignment settling in. When alignment settles, it feels calm, not dramatic. Calm is one of the clearest signs that a threat has passed. You may notice that questions fade. Earlier you may have asked, "What is happening?" Or "Why does this feel heavy?" Now, those questions lose urgency. They do not demand answers anymore. That is because the issue that created them is no longer active. Questions arise from tension. When tension dissolves, curiosity relaxes. The silence also tests something important: your ability to trust what you cannot see. Heaven does not keep warning you about what it has already secured. If it did, fear will replace faith. Silence invites you to walk forward without needing constant confirmation. That walk is not reckless, it is confident. Confidence grows when you move without resistance. This is where many people accidentally reopen doors by overthinking. They assume silence means they miss something. They go searching for problems that no longer exist. But searching re-engages what has already been disengaged. The wisdom here is simple. Do not resurrect what heaven has already silenced. Let the quiet remain quiet. Another sign of healthy silence is restored normalcy. Ordinary days feel ordinary again. You stop scanning for signs. You stop bracing for impact. Life resumes its natural rhythm. That rhythm is not ignorance. It is peace. Peace does not require constant explanation. It simply exists. Silence also allows gratitude to emerge naturally. Not forced thankfulness, but quiet appreciation. You may find yourself grateful without fully knowing why. That is often a sign that something unseen was resolved. Gratitude follows protection, even when the threat was never fully visible. As this part comes to a close, understand this deeply. The silence after the warning is not empty space. It is filled with assurance. It is heaven saying, "You heard. You responded. Now walk forward. You are not meant to linger at the gate anymore. You passed it with awareness. Now the path ahead is clear enough to walk without fear." The story does not end in silence, but silence is the bridge to the ending. It allows everything to settle into its rightful place. And in the final part, that settled peace will be named, blessed, and affirmed. So you can move forward not just protected, but uplifted, confident, and assured that what was meant to interrupt your destiny has been fully addressed. And now the message comes to its final resting place, not with fear, but with assurance. What began as a warning ends as confirmation. What arrived with urgency now settles into peace. This is how divine messages complete their work, not by keeping you alert forever, but by restoring you to confidence. Heaven does not leave you standing in tension. It brings you back into alignment, where clarity replaces concern and trust replaces vigilance. You were never meant to live looking over your shoulder. The warning was not given to trap your attention in what could have happened, but to free your future from it. What was hidden hath been exposed. What was moving hath been interrupted. What was approaching has been addressed. You are not imagining the calm that follows. This calm is evidence that something real had been resolved. Let this truth anchor deeply in you. Protection does not always feel dramatic. Often, it feels like quiet strength. It feels like waking up without heaviness. It feels like thinking clearly again. It feels like returning to yourself. That is what divine defense produces. Not anxiety, not obsession, not constant alertness, but grounded peace. This is the assurance heaven offers you now. You are not walking forward unguarded. You are not stepping into uncertainty alone. The same authority that warned you has established boundaries around you. Those boundaries do not require your constant attention. They simply hold. You do not need to check them. You need to trust them. There is also restoration happening within you. Not just protection from what was external, but repair of what felt shaken internally. Confidence is returning. Focus is returning. Direction is returning. You may notice a renewed sense of purpose, even if nothing around you has visibly changed yet. That renewal is not emotional. It is spiritual realignment. When pressure lifts, purpose rises naturally. This closing is not meant to dramatize what happened, but to normalize what comes next. You move forward. You live fully. You pursue what is ahead of you without carrying the weight of what tried to interfere. You do not need to explain this to everyone. You do not need to defend your peace. You simply walk in it. Heaven's tone now is gentle, because firmness has already done its work. The alarm has served its purpose. The gate has been crossed. The sequence has been redirected. What remains is assurance, quiet, steady, and reliable. Assurance that you were seen. Assurance that you were warned in time. Assurance that you responded wisely. And assurance that what was meant to proceed without interruption did not. Take a moment to breathe this in. Not relief alone, but gratitude. Gratitude that you were not left unaware. Gratitude that silence now carries peace instead of pressure. Gratitude that your path continues forward without the weight you could not explain before. Before this message closes completely, this moment needs to be sealed intentionally, not out of fear, but out of affirmation. Type "I walk forward" covered in the comments if you receive this assurance. Blessing code 903 is now activated. This is a declaration that you are not lingering in warning, but stepping into confidence. It marks the end of interruption and the beginning of forward movement with clarity. It affirms that you are no longer reacting, you are walking. Carry this with you. Heaven does not warn and then abandon. It warns and then establishes peace. You are not being watched nervously, you are being guarded faithfully. The message has done its work. Now your life continues, not interrupted, but protected. As this message settles into peace, hear this clearly. What God just did for you, He longs to do for countless others still walking unaware. I feel led to say this directly. When you give in this moment, you become a carrier of the same light that just protected you. The Word declares that those who water others will themselves be refreshed, and your support becomes living water to souls in need of warning and hope. This is not charity. This is alignment with heaven's flow. Act now through Super Thanks, channel membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description, and the PayPal QR code is on your screen. Obey the prompting, release your seed, and watch God multiply peace, protection, and light through your obedience.